Continuing on in the base, let's revisit the sketch. Should be sketch 3 here under Cut Extrude 2. To get back into a sketch or get back into a feature, we're going to right click and edit the sketch. Okay, so that put me back in here. I did the placing this dimension and the driving pretty quick. So what's going to happen here is this extension line is a little bit grayer. Not quite as dark as the extension lines for the 12 and the 138. So if I right click on this, under the dimension, there's going to be a check mark next to the driven. And what that says is this and this and this should add up to this. And if I change this and it goes into conflict with this, then that makes it an over-defining condition. So we're trying to keep this fully defined. The minus sign is underdefined. Occasionally you would end up with red and possibly an over-defined condition, but a lot of times that that geometry is going to be easily corrected by just letting this be a driving dimension or canceling it so that it doesn't participate. All right, so we rotate that around. Let's go ahead with the text. All right, so a lot of times I hit Control-1 to bring it back into the front view. Well, a lot of times when we're doing text, you have to decide, is this going to be engraving? If this was a molded part, well, aluminum 2024 isn't really a sand casting or a molded. It's pretty ductile, has a fair amount of corrosion resistance. I just don't see it being something that we would want to spend a lot of time with putting this this geometry in. Maybe stamping a part number, stamping the name into it. But you really have to decide how much it's worth having this debossed text in. All right, so let's go ahead and open up a sketch, picking on the face, going into the sketch. We switch over to the sketch tools, and here we have the text. And I want to start off with a curve. Oh, I didn't draw my center line yet. So old amalgamated is great if you want to put that in. We can put in MCC, you can put in your name. And notice it puts it kind of in the bottom corner there at the origin. So if I accept that, I can go back then and put a center line, and I'll just make the center line from edge to edge and put a dimension 15 looks pretty good. Since I'm picking my height, if I use the scroll wheel to zoom up and then double click, that will put me back into the text property manager. And sometimes it's kind of hard to find that that text handle to get back in there, but if you double click, it will pick it up. When I select on the curve, now I get to make the justification. So we have the left alignment, the center, the right alignment, the reversing the text, front to back. All right, so by using those different combinations, you can get this going just about any way that you want it conveniently. For a machining process, I will typically make the spacing a little bit bigger. Some of the crazier fonts, you can try them, but some of the crazier fonts will produce those contour region type solid body things where it can get a little crazy. So stay with a nice simple font and go into the font. They have the Century Gothic. Looking for the preview. I'm trying to find a good example of what not to do. Nothing too bad. trying to think what those were called. Well, anyway, the Gothic scripts were always a bit of a challenge with the really fancy swirling and intersecting geometries. All right, so we'll stay with one of those. I'll increase the height. You can go by points or by millimeters. So if I were to bring that up to 10 millimeters, hit OK. That looks pretty good. And we'll accept for the sketch, and then the features, extrude cut, 1 millimeter should be plenty. All right, so that's going to make a cut into the geometry. So if this was head curvature or was a little bit more complicated, we would potentially look at some of the other tools to create that shape. All right, let's go ahead with the fillets. And so want to look real quick on the right mouse. Since nothing's selected, we still have quite a bit of tools to work with. But when I pick a geometry and get the pop-up, I'm going to be able to go right to the fillet, which is the same as coming up here to the fillet. And we'll put in the radius of 12 millimeters. I can pick in the box, or we can come back over to the property manager and pick in the box. And that will be the 12. And again, with the multiple selection, you select and then wait, and you're going to get a filtering tool that would put radiuses everywhere. All right, so this is a little more complicated than what I would like, so I'll just get out of it by dragging away, picking my other two edges for the 12 millimeters, and accepting the shape. One more time to the fillet, and then this one's going to be 3 millimeters along that edge. And we can accept it. All right, so now we're ready to save and do something with our part. But before I find the location, I want to go ahead into the file properties. All right, we mentioned in the in kind of the tour that we have a custom properties interface. This is where that that information ends up. So when we go into the custom property, I'm going to save this and name it base, so that will become the part name. So there may be a good reason to have the part name not exactly the same as. Right, so we have a description, we have a part number, and on the part number we're going to enter by picking that that value or that field name under the pull down arrow. Then I can come over to the value and the expression, and I'm going to put in, looks like either OA or 0A. I'm going to go with the 0A, 4-32. And the material, well, if we bring down to the material, then there is a system location to go pick up the material. Because it hasn't been specified yet, there's nothing really we can do with that. If I wanted to do mass properties, I could include the weight, and that would pick up based on what we tell it, and would still like that was called mass instead of weight, but that's a minor detail. We're not ready to track revisions, but maybe something like a finish, and this one is going to be raw, but I could pick anodize, powder coat, something along those lines. And let's see if there's anything else that I would want to put in there. So our first couple of passes through this material, weight, finish, we're going to have to remember those because we're going to need to do those again for each of the remaining parts. All right, so configuration specific would be if we're going to make this into multiple parts. If there's one part and there's not going to be any size changes or any configurations, then we don't have to worry about the configuration specific. But that gives us an option if there are multiple configurations, and we'll get to those. All right, so we save. I go find my folder for the, need a new folder, assignment 2, if I can spell. Close enough. All right, and then this is going to be the base. .sldprt. All right, so that gets us into our next piece.